The FPV hobby is made up of people who like to do it themselves. In fact, FPV as a whole wouldn't exist if people hadn't started ripping apart their Nintendo Wii controllers, pulling the gyro chips out of them, and building quadcopter flight controllers with them. So whenever I make a video where I say, look, here is a product that you can buy, people always say, I could build it myself cheaper. And that's true. In fact, that's why this naked GoPro, which is a decased GoPro to save weight, I did a video about how to make this. And when I review today's products, the GEPRC Naked Hero 8 and the Insta360 SMO 4K, and you get tempted to say, why would you pay so much for one of those? I could just decase it myself. Links in the video description. But for those who don't want to rip their own GoPro apart and make it themselves, I'm Joshua Bardwell, and you're going to learn something today. The products that we're looking at in this video, the Insta360 SMO 4K and the GEPRC Naked Hero 8, were provided for me by their respective manufacturers. I did not purchase them with my own money. I have not received any cash or other compensation in exchange for this video, and no one has had any approval or preconditions on the contents of this video before it was released. There's really no debate that GoPro is the market leader in FPV-focused action cameras, and probably most other markets as well. GoPro strikes a really, really good balance of good image quality, good durability, price. I mean, there's way better cameras out there for a lot more money. But almost anything you could get for much less money is going to have much worse image quality, much worse features, and much worse durability. And that's why, in some ways, the biggest competitor to a GoPro is an older GoPro or a refurbished GoPro. But there are times when a GoPro is not what you want for durability. For example, if you're trying to carry a GoPro on a smaller quad like this little guy, or maybe some of the lightweight 4 inches, or maybe even a Cinewhoop, where you just don't want all the weight of a full-size Hero 7 or Hero 8, that's where a naked GoPro comes in. And a naked GoPro just means that we've taken, well, I was going to say it means that we've taken the guts of a GoPro and we've ripped out a whole bunch of pieces that we don't need and basically left just the image sensor, the lens, and in this case the screen in a much smaller case. And we'll take a look at an actual weight comparison a little later in the video. But this GEPRC Hero 8 is legitimately the internals of a Hero 8. Smacked into a plastic case. So if you're wondering, well, can GEPRC really make an action camera? How is the image quality? And yeah, we'll do an image quality comparison a little later in the video too. But at the end of the day, this is just a Hero 8. And so it should deliver all of the image quality and performance and functionality that you expect from a Hero 8. This, on the other hand, is the BetaFPV Insta360 SMO 4K. And I don't actually know what it is. Is it an Insta360 1R put into a different size case? This is an actual commercial product developed by BetaFPV and Insta360. And in that sense, you might expect it to be a little bit better because it was designed from the start to be what it is by the manufacturer, not sort of slapped together by some company out there somewhere. Well, we're going to take a look at these two cameras side by side in this video, and we're going to try to determine which one is best. Let's start with a little bit of an unboxing. The GEPRC Hero 8 comes with an ND16 ND filter that's going to give you smoother motion blur, smoother movement, and help hide a little bit of vibration and jitter on very sunny days. Comes with a mounting bracket that mounts onto the back of the case, and that's going to fit quads like this GEPRC Smart quad. But if you don't have that exact quad, there's ample 3D printable mounts on Thingiverse and elsewhere on the internet for whatever kind of quad you've got. And a spare set of screws. Oh, and a nice little Torx driver for you to install those, take it apart with. This board here is key to the success of any naked GoPro conversion. So they call it the Beck board, and it's got a voltage regulator on board that powers the camera. This can take between 2S and 6S voltage, and it steps that down to 5 volts, which is what the the GoPro requires. That board is more than just a voltage regulator though. You can see here it's got power and record buttons, so you can interact with the camera. Another neat thing about the GEPRC board is that it has this auto power switch. By default, the auto power switch is in the right-hand position, which means that when you plug in the battery, the camera will stay off and you need to press the power button to turn it on. And there's a good reason, because the warning from GEPRC is that if the camera is left turned on for too long without the airflow of flying, then it could burn itself. I assume they wouldn't have said that. Maybe they're just covering their butts, but I assume they wouldn't have said that if it wasn't a real risk. So the safest thing to do would be to set this so that you have to turn the camera on, and then right before you go to fly, you turn it on and you start recording. However, if you want to, you can slide this to the left, which will cause it to automatically power up the minute you plug in power. Let me just demonstrate that. There you go. And you don't have to hit the power button at all. Here's the Insta360, and its unboxing is going to be a little bit simpler. It comes with an ND16 filter and a UV filter and a spare backplate, and that's about it. Oh, and the wiring, of course. As far as weight goes, the GEPRC comes in at 28 grams. The Insta360 comes in at 31 grams, pretty close to the same. Now, these cameras don't have batteries built into them. You have to solder a power lead like this to your quadcopter. As I said earlier, they're powered from VBAT, so there's no issue with a voltage regulator. You can put it on any quad that runs between 2 and 6S. But you will need to solder up this wire, and if you have more than one quad that you're going to put the camera on, you're going to need to solder a wire like this on each of them. You won't be able to easily just move the camera from one quad to another like you would if it had an internal battery. Oh, well, GEPRC did get this right. This is the Smart 35 HD quadcopter. It's designed for use with naked cameras like this, and it comes with the power lead pre-installed. We're still going to go ahead and solder it up just in case, so you know how to do it if you need to. So here's the wire that comes with the Insta360, and here's the wire that comes with the GEPRC, and both of them have a red and a black power wire, which go to VBAT between 2 and 6S on your drone. They also have an additional wire. The GEPRC has a yellow wire, which is used to start and stop recording using an aux switch, and the Insta360 has a blue and a yellow wire. The blue wire can be used to turn the camera on and off remotely using an aux switch, and the yellow wire can be used to stop recording remotely using an aux switch. I'm going to make a separate video showing how to set those functions up. I just want you to know that those functions exist. But for now, I'm just going to solder up the, I guess I need to solder up the Insta360 wire just to power, so we can at least get some footage off the camera. Now that they're both wired up, we can power them on and we can see how they interact with the smartphone app. And yeah, these guys don't have any like joysticks or touch screens, so basically the only way to configure them is with a smartphone app. And we'll start with the Insta360 SMO 4K. Let's just go into my Insta360 app and see if I can add the camera. Oh, got it. Got him. Oh yeah. Boom. There we go. Hello. We're set up. And we can go through all the normal parameters. So let's see what this camera's got. Can do video or video. Can do time lapse and time shift. HDR can be okay. As resolution goes, we've got 4K 24, 4K 25, 4K 30, 4K 60, 4K 24, and 4.3 resolution. 2.7K in widescreen. Oh, and 100 frame per second, 2.7K. Impressive. For 3 versions of the same resolution, 1080p in 16:9 and 1440p in 4.3. We have a lot of choices there. Now, I have to point out that people have downloaded like the operating system files from this camera. Actually, it turns out this camera just runs Linux. Who knew? And they've downloaded the operating system files and have discovered that the files that the camera outputs are the resolution that it says it is, but internally the actual resolution is a lot lower. Now, I'm not sure if this is something that has been fixed in a firmware update. I'll double check that and maybe put some text on the screen or something. I haven't heard of it being fixed in a firmware update. So you're going to want to take a very close look at the image quality of the images that I'm going to show you a little later in the video and see if it's up to your standards. And you're going to want to know that when it's recording 4K, internally it's not really doing 4K. Maybe it's still good enough. Still, it's kind of weird that they just... It's kind of weird. Now, as for the Hero 8, it's going to connect to the same GoPro app that you've probably used before, so I'm not going to go in depth into what the app does, but basically it lets you configure the camera. And that's really important because, as we said, this doesn't have any screen or other way of interacting with it to configure the options. But there's a question. Normally on a GoPro, you have to, in the camera, activate pairing mode. It's not like the Insta360, which just comes with its Wi-Fi enabled and ready to go. So what are you going to do? GEPRC has been very clever. They're running, I think they must be running, the GoPro Labs firmware on this. This is an official firmware released by GoPro that has additional functionality. And one of the pieces of functionality it has is the ability to configure the camera via QR code. And this QR code, which comes from the manual from GEPRC, will activate binding mode or pairing mode in the camera. By the way, you could check out the GoPro Labs firmware online. I'll put a link in the video description. I assume I'll be able to find it. There's a whole bunch of other QR codes you could create to change settings without ever connecting to your phone. I always just use my phone though. Let's give it a try. Okay, so we power up the camera. Okay. Scan the QR code. After the red light and the code scan is confirmed to be successful, press quickly the record key 3 times. Okay, so we're going to scan. Oh, it got it. I saw it. Press record 3 times. 1, 2, 3. It found it. Woo! That's pretty freaking slick. Now right here we can see the Hero 8 presets, which can be tweaked however you like. I would like to tell you there's another app out there. Let me just leave this app and disconnect. There's another app out there called GoPro BLE Remote, which connects to the GoPro over Bluetooth, and it is a pretty handy way of configuring your cameras. If anything, it's just faster than the GoPro app. For example, let's take GoPro 9522. This is GEPRC Hero 8, and I have a preset FPV 2.7K, and I just apply that preset to the camera over Bluetooth, and the camera is now, it's set up exactly like I want it. The ProTune settings and everything are the same, and I can do that with any GoPro that I've got, whether it's a Hero 8, Hero 7, doesn't matter. Boom, I know it's set up how I want it for FPV. This is also, you do have to bind to the camera, bind to your phone using the GoPro app before this will work though, at least as far as I know. Yeah, great. So the camera, oh, battery level, naked equals unlimited power. This recognizes it's naked. That's cute. So now we're ready to go. The next thing to do is to go out and get some flight footage. And GEPRC made an interesting choice of sending me these cameras with the Smart 35, which is not the kind of cinematic quad that you normally would expect a naked GoPro to go with. But what the heck? Let's take it out. Let's fly it. Let's see how it goes. Well, this really highlights the weakness, literally, of these naked GoPro cameras. That was a relatively minor impact. It ripped the camera off. It knocked the cover off of here. The lens seems okay for now, and ripped the power plug off. I'd almost kind of rather see a it's got a locking plug. I'd almost rather see a non-locking plug, and there's a chance it would pull out without damaging the frickin' backboard. Fortunately, I have spares for all these things, but it really demonstrates that these naked GoPros are mostly for cinematic flying and not for even the lightest of freestyles. I hope that the GoPro itself isn't damaged, because that's going to be, you know, the Hero 8 is of course we'll find out. Since these naked style cameras are so bad at holding up to freestyle knocks, let's do some cine style flying, and no offense to any actual really good cinematic style pilots. I just mean I'm going to fly slow and smooth with stabilization on. So hypersmooth is on here, and I'm just going to reverse the footage, which, you know, that's cinematic, right? What we're looking at right now is the GoPro at 2.7K resolution, and we are using the flat color profile, which I always shoot GoPro in. I think the flat profile kind of looks decent by itself, but if you know how to color grade, you could put a grade on it, and that's what the editor is going to do right now. Okay, so that's with somebody's color grade on it, but you could, of course, do whatever you want. Now, here's the same thing in 4K if you prefer, and I am going to be uploading this to YouTube in 4K as well, although obviously YouTube is going to reduce the quality somewhat, but you got a 4K camera, you're definitely obligated to show some 4K footage, and here it is. The reason you're not hearing any motor noise is that this naked GoPro does not have a microphone. The Insta360 does. And now for something completely different, here's an example of a quadcopter flying forward. This is 1080p at 120 frames per second. The Hero 8 can also do 240 frames per second, but not with super view active, only with the wide field of view. So here's 120 FPS, and that means we can do these really cool speed ramps. Or you can just get buttery smooth footage. Although most people don't render at 120 FPS for their final output. Next, we're going to take a look at the footage from the Insta360 SMO 4K. But before we do that, I'm going to import this footage into the Insta360 Studio app on my computer. Now, there is also an Android and iOS mobile app that does the same stuff if you have an underpowered computer or you just prefer working on your phone. And what I want you to see is that these files that come out of the camera, I mean, you can use them. We could just drop them into Premiere, but there's a lot more you can do with them once you have this Insta360 app. So for example, notice that over here on the right, I have the option to change the field of view of the footage from how it was recorded after the fact. In the GoPro, you pick the field of view in the camera, you hit record, and that field of view is locked in. That's not the case for the Insta360. And this is because Insta360 was originally a 360 camera where post-processing is always necessary. That 360 footage out of the camera is useless until you do this kind of post-processing. And they've just carried that thought process forward, which gives you a little bit more flexibility. We also have the option to enable or disable flow state stabilization. That's Insta360's version of hypersmooth here in the app. The footage out of the camera is not stabilized. The stabilization is done in the app. And that means that if we decide we want to put up a raw edit, we can. If we decide we want to turn the stabilization on or we don't like the way the stabilization looks, we can make that decision after the fact. So here's the first footage I want to show you out of the Insta360 SMO 4K. This is 2.7K 30 FPS. This is what I usually use for freestyle footage, and this is not stabilized. The other thing I want you to know is this is the native color and exposure out of the camera with no post-processing at all. And you can decide for yourself how good you think it looks. I do think that the SMO 4K struggles a little bit with exposure compared to the GoPro. For example, going into this section, you can see that a lot of the tree shadows are completely black because the sun is causing the exposure to get darker. Whereas I think that now it opens up a little, but it's going to get dark again in just a second. I think the GoPro, there, see lots of dark shadows here. The GoPro does a little bit better job with its exposure. However, the SMO 4K does give you an option to work around that. This is 4K 60 FPS footage, and I have reversed it and stabilized it so you can get a sense of what the stabilization is like. But the number one thing you're going to see different is that the colors are really desaturated. This is the SMO 4K's flat or log color profile, and that's going to preserve a whole lot more shadow detail and give a whole lot more latitude to the exposure. Unlike GoPro's flat, which isn't quite as aggressive, I don't think you would want to watch this by itself at all. You would want to apply a color grade like this. So I feel like the Insta360 can hold its own in terms of exposure with the GoPro, but you're going to commit to color grading it in post, whereas with the GoPro, I feel like the results coming out of the camera are a little more usable as they are. I should let you know that my editor thought the log footage from the Insta360 was really, really bad. You can pause here if you want to read his full comment. The SMO 4K can also do high frame rate recording. This is 1080p at 200 frames per second. As a reminder, the Hero 8 can also do 200 frames per second, but we only saw 120 FPS because the Hero 8 can't do the highest frame rate at the widest field of view. And I think for FPV flying, the widest field of view is usually desirable. We can see as we ramp here into slow-mo that the 200 FPS is noticeably slower than the 120 FPS that we saw for the GoPro. There's one more comparison I want to make before we go into the final conclusion, and that is this still image comparison. Now, just to be clear, this is 4K 30 video, but I've just held the camera steady, well, mostly steady, so that we're getting a sense of the native quality and resolution of the sensor and not as much about the encoding and so forth that would come into play when we're doing fast motion. And what we'll do, this is the GoPro we're looking at here. Oh, I shouldn't have told you just for scientific sake. This is the GoPro here, and we can get a sense of like how much detail there is. This is 100% zoom. We can even go to 200% zoom and really start getting in there on the pixels. Okay, this is not a photograph. It's an image, but it's a video, but it's just not a very fast moving video. And then we'll switch to the SMO 4K and we'll do the same thing. We'll go to 100% and take a look at just how much resolution there is, how much detail. The SMO 4K is in the normal color, not the log color. And we can even go to 200%. And here they are side by side. I just tried to match the frame as best I could. Let's zoom in on this to 200% and see what we've got. So here we could look at the pickets of the fence, for example, and see how these images compare. It certainly looks to me, oh yeah, for sure. Look right around here. It certainly looks to me like the GoPro has more resolution. Not just like sharpening, but it's just doing a better job of bringing out these details and without looking really like over sharpened. Let's check out the electric wire and the tree branches here, for example. Oh yeah, so the Insta360 is definitely softer. So that brings us to the end of the video, and as always, the question, which one should you buy? And I think I want to start the conclusion by saying that clearly the Naked Hero 8 is a great camera. The Hero 8, until the Hero 9 came out, it was the gold standard for professional FPV use. It doesn't have the image quality of a true cinema camera, but you can't carry a cinema camera on a little 5-inch mini quad. And so obviously whatever you need to do up to and including Peter McKinnon level cinema stuff, the Hero 8 can do it. There are inherent disadvantages of a naked camera, and there's a very legitimate question of whether you would be better served by building a rig that could carry a full-size GoPro instead of a naked GoPro, but that would be a topic for another video. For now, we assume you want a naked camera. The Hero 8 can't do it. It's great that it supports standard Hero 8 sized ND filters and other protective covers. It's especially great because the protective cover that comes with this case popped out in the very first minimal crash. And by the way, the included ND filter is also completely useless. The scratches came from the tiniest of crashes. I'm going to guess this is some kind of cheap coated glass that instead of an actual proper tinted glass, but you just buy some Polar Pro or something and you're good to go. But the big reason the Insta360 is even in this comparison is price. This costs about $240. This costs about $450. So the GoPro is about $200 more, and that's a lot. On paper, the capabilities of the Insta360 stack up really well, but as we saw, the image quality comparison between them, it's just not as good. Is it good enough for what you're gonna do? Depends. What other things differentiate these cameras? Let's see. The GoPro has a screen on the front, which is super nice, just to be able to see what resolution you're in and verify your recording time left. As far as the apps go, the GoPro's app is much smoother to use, especially connecting to the Insta360. I kept getting this error message. You must accept the connection on the camera screen. Well, it doesn't have a screen. And the user manual says, well, just back out of that dialogue and then you'll be good. But it just kept popping up again and again and again. Sometimes it would take me 10 minutes of just trying to connect to the camera to change the stupid resolution. And if I was like actually working with the camera, instead of just, even if I was just at the flight field trying to change resolution, I'd be annoyed. So there's still some work to be done there, but hey, maybe it's worth $200 to you. The only other thing I would say about these cameras is that the Insta360 was designed by Insta360 in partnership with BetaFPV to be a naked camera. And since that was its intent, then I would bet, like, these naked cameras, I'm not talking about the GEPRC one specifically because it's too new, but the naked cameras like the BetaFPV Beck board like blows out and blows the camera and it's just not very reliable. I've had good results with this one, but it is a retrofit and you never know what the long-term longevity is going to be. Whereas like, I don't worry as much that the Insta360 is just going to smoke itself sitting on the bench powered on. I think Insta360 probably anticipated that and planned for it. Whichever of these two cameras you decide to get, there are links down in the video description where you can pick them up. Remember, you can pick up this case and the Beck board from GEPRC if you already have a Hero 8 that you want to take apart, or they're currently, at the time of this recording, selling them. Who knows how much longer that'll last. Speaking of how much longer that will last, BetaFPV, thanks a lot for sending me this months ago, when it first came out, maybe more. Didn't get around to reviewing it. Now I have gotten around to reviewing it, and it's out. BetaFPV doesn't have it anymore. It's not. I don't know if it's discontinued or what. Maybe it was a one-off, but you can still find these at some dealers around the world, and I'll put links in the video description where you can find them. And a lot of these links are going to be affiliate links, in case you didn't know. What that means is that you click that link, you make any purchase at the affiliated store, and then you get a small commission. And it's an easy way for you to help support the channel, and it doesn't cost you anything. Thanks so much for watching. Happy flying. What are you doing in here? The least you could do is subscribe or join my Patreon, or like just here's another video I picked out for you. Jeez.